Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Third New Hope Baptist Church, located here at 12850 Plymouth Road. And my name is David Underwood. I am a trustee here at Third New Hope, as well as being the managing director of Detroit Community Care Network, which was one of the supporters and sponsors of the event here this evening. We'd like to welcome each of you to this amazing event. We're going to have some powerful information being shared with you this evening with our subject Beyond the Diagnosis, Cancer, and Disability Benefits from our dear friends from Wayne State University School of Law. They are doing amazing work. We're excited that you're here, and I'm excited to be here because I am a recent cancer survivor myself. So learning this information and to be able to share this information out with loved ones and individuals in my family and friends and all those that are impacted by this dreaded disease, I'm excited to learn what it is that they have for us this evening. So without further ado, I want to bring up the team from the School of Law at Wayne State University, Mr. Nicholas. Come on up, Mr. Nicholas. Thank you.
Oh, thanks so much, David. So my name is Nick Rossio, and I work with the Legal Advocacy for People with Cancer Clinic over at Wayne State Law School. I'm here tonight with my colleagues, Min, the staff attorney for our clinic, and Kathy, the director of the clinic. So we're happy to be here to talk to you guys a bit today about what we do for the people we see and the patients that we help out through the Legal Advocacy for People with Cancer Clinic. We wanted to thank Brittany. I know Brittany Dow is here tonight for helping us set this whole thing up through the Karmanos Office of Community Outreach and Engagement. And we wanted to thank David and Third New Hope Church for having us here as well. It's a terrific venue to host something like this. So as David said, we are from the law school. So before getting into any of the substance here, just have a quick disclaimer for everybody. So just to let you know, the intent of this presentation is to provide legal information for you. So we're going to talk a little bit about the things that we do for the clients we help. But if you need to look into any of the things we talk about or apply for benefits, it's recommended to reach out to an organization or somebody who's got experience in disability law that can help you out with any of these things. So the three main areas that you can look for in obtaining disability benefits that we're going to be talking about tonight are first through some government program. Now that's state or federal. Then you've got private insurance plans are another resource that can be available to you. And finally, there are some benefits that might be available through your employer, depending on who you work for and sometimes some other things like how many people that person employs or that company employs as well. So those are some of the broad areas we're going to cover tonight, starting with some of the government benefits that might be available to you. So with a cancer diagnosis, one of the things that we see most with the people we work with are, at base level, oftentimes what you need to do is make sure that you're still able to cover your expenses and take care of all of that as well. So the first benefit we're going to talk about tonight is the state disability assistance through the state of Michigan. So as the name implies, this is a benefit paid by the state of Michigan, available to people in Michigan here. So the thing that makes this benefit a little bit unique compared to the federal benefits that we're going to get into in just a moment here is that if approved for state disability assistance through the state of Michigan, your benefit amount is always going to be the same. It's always going to be $200. So it's really just meant as an assistance while you're applying for federal benefits or if you don't have those federal benefits available to you. Another thing to note is that this is a benefit that's not only available to individuals who have a disability, it's also available to the people who care for those people. So if you're acting as a caregiver for somebody who has a disability, this is something that you could look into as well. The thing to note with that is that you have to be providing care to somebody that is determined to be medically necessary for at least 90 days. So that person they're unable to work for a certain amount of time. They need somebody to help them out with their day-to-day activities like meal prep, laundry, bathing, just the things that we take for granted a lot of times. You'd be able to get a benefit for yourself as well for being there for that person during that time. Now, another thing to note with state disability assistance is that in order to apply for it, you have to make sure that you're applying for federal benefits as well. And I think I had touched on it, but what's neat about state disability assistance is that you and the person you're caring for, the person with a disability, can both receive this benefit at the same time. So it's not one or the other. You can both apply for it, and you can both be eligible and approve for it during that time. So, requirements. With a lot of these federal benefits we're going to be talking about tonight, they're generally going to have sort of two buckets of requirements that you have to fulfill to be approved. The first is financial elements that'll be involved, and second are the medical elements involved. With state disability insurance, the financial elements are a little more lenient. The state of Michigan has an asset limit for this benefit of $15,000. And when it says $15,000 in countable assets, that's just things you own. So the state of Michigan is primarily going to be looking at things like your bank account, any investments you have, that sort of thing. Your one vehicle that you own is excluded from that calculation, so the car you use to get around or get to work or go wherever is not counted toward that $15,000. And any personal belongings you have don't count toward that as well. So any clothing, your phone, that stuff isn't going to be factored in to that calculation. Now, when making that calculation, the state of Michigan is also going to look at your home. So as long as your home is less than $200,000, that's not going to count against you as well. And keep in mind that the $200,000 refers to what you own in that home. So if you still have a mortgage on that home, then that could sort of affect that calculation as well. So even if the home is worth over $250,000, if you have a mortgage on it, you may not own up to $200,000 of that home yet. Now, the state of Michigan also considers your income when determining whether or not you might be eligible for state disability assistance. Now, the thing with this is that, unfortunately, the state of Michigan is not necessarily clear as to what that limit is. There's not any set figure in the law to saying that you can only make this much money before you're not eligible for state disability assistance anymore. But it's just something that they take into consideration when they're looking through your application for this benefit. And finally, because this is a benefit provided by the state of Michigan through the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, it's only available to U.S. citizens who do currently live in the state of Michigan. Now, on to that second bucket that I mentioned earlier. Those were the financial requirements. We're going to talk about some of the medical eligibility requirements now. So the nice thing about the medical side here is that it's not a list of a bunch of things that you have to meet. It's really just one of these three things that you have to satisfy in order to be medically eligible for state disability benefits. The first of which is just meeting the state's definition of disability. So the state of Michigan, through the Department of Human Services, the Department of Disability Services, will make a disability decision. So they'll take a bunch of evidence. They'll look at your medical records to determine whether or not you meet this definition. And under the law of the state of Michigan, that means having one or more severe physical or mental conditions that has prevented you from working for at least 90 days. So that's one of those elements that can qualify you under the medical eligibility requirement for state disability. The second is if you're already receiving some other form of government-related benefits. So if you have Medicaid due to a disability, then that's something that would qualify you under the medical side for state disability assistance as well. And then finally, if you reside in a special facility like an adult care foster home or an addiction recovery home or something of that sort, and then that's another thing that would satisfy this requirement as well. Now, how to apply? So of course, you can always go visit your Michigan Department of Health and Human Services office in person and speak to someone there, and they'll be happy to get you all the documents that are necessary to complete an application. The fastest way to do it, though, is just to go online and use an MI Bridges account. So if you don't have one of those, it's really simple to make. You can just go to the MI Bridges website, and they'll ask for some identifying information like your social security number, just to make sure you are who you say you are. And through there, you can access a bunch of state resources. One of those is applications for things like state disability assistance. Now, in general, no matter which way you go with here, after you do complete that application, there's generally a 60-day period that you'll have to wait to hear back from the state of Michigan as far as whether or not they've accepted or denied that application. So that was state disability assistance. Now we're going to get into a couple of the federal benefits that we help a lot of patients with in our clinic. And these are something that we're a lot more familiar with at the Legal Advocacy for People with Cancer Clinic. The federal benefits through the Social Security Administration can provide a lot more assistance as well than the state benefits can. So the Social Security Administration provides a good number of benefits. The ones we're going to be focusing on tonight, the ones related to disability, are Social Security Disability Insurance, which often goes by the term SSDI, and Supplemental Security Income, which often goes by SSI. So starting off with some information about SSDI. So the basics of this program. SSDI is an insurance program. So this is something that you've earned, really. It's something that you pay into through your employment taxes. So when you get your paycheck and you see that little deduction toward the bottom that says FICA taxes, that's going into this program to make sure you've got this relief if you ever happen to need it. Now, unlike the state disability assistance, the amount that you can get through SSDI is going to vary depending on what your work history is like. So how much you worked, how much you earned while you were working, it's all going to depend on those factors. And we'll get into how you can get an estimate as to what that amount is going to be later on. Now, who is it available to? So in order to qualify for SSDI benefits, you have to be an insured individual. So that means you have to have worked long enough and recent enough. And SSDI uses something called work credits to sort of determine whether you meet those length and those recency requirements. And we'll go over work credits in the next couple slides here. And in addition to having to meet the work requirements for SSDI, you also have to meet their definition of disability. So the federal definition of disability is going to be a little bit different from the state definition that we just talked about. Work credits. So, like I said, there are two categories that Social Security is going to look at in terms of determining whether or not you have the work history that'll qualify you for SSDI benefits. First is whether you've worked recently enough, and the second is whether you've worked long enough. So, in that recency category, you can earn up to 4 work credits a year. And right now in 2025, about every $1,800 that you make is going to earn you 1 work credit. So, to qualify for the recency side of this requirement, you have to have worked 5 of the last 10 years when you apply. And what that means is that you need 20 of these work credits throughout the last 10 years. In terms of whether or not you've worked long enough, so this is going to look past that 10-year mark, and Social Security is going to want you to have obtained at least 40 work credits, which is equivalent to 10 years of work under this definition, in order to be eligible for Social Security disability insurance as well. Now that number varies if you're under 30. Of course, if you're 22, they don't expect you to have been working since you were 12. So in order to check whether you have sufficient work credits to be eligible for SSDI and to be able to get an idea, if you do, what your benefit amount could be as well, it's really helpful to either access, if you don't, or if you have one, or make one if you don't, a My Social Security account. And you can do this through ssa.gov. It's similar to making an MI Bridges account through the state of Michigan. They're going to ask some identifying information, but access to this account is going to grant you access to all the information you need to determine what your eligibility for Social Security disability insurance might look like. Now, if you don't have access to a My SSA account, or you're not able to make a My SSA account, you can also call your local field office and talk to somebody there, and they'll be happy to assist you in determining how many work credits you have and giving you an idea as to whether you're eligible for this benefit. Or you can always call the national number as well at 1-800-722-1213. There's going to be usually a bit longer of a hold at that national number, but fortunately nowadays they'll just let you leave your number and call you back in an hour or so, depending on how many people they've got ahead of you, which is nice. Now, the second federal benefit that we work with a lot is called supplemental security income. That's the SSI benefit. So this is different than SSDI in that it's not an insurance program, it's more of a needs-based program. So this isn't something that's deducted from your payroll taxes that you pay into so you have access to it later. It's something that the federal government provides people on an as-needed basis. Now, as such, different from Social Security disability insurance, where your benefit is going to depend on how much you worked, with supplemental security income, there's going to be a maximum amount that you can receive, and that's called the federal benefit rate. Now, that changes every year to keep up with the cost of living. Now, in 2025, it's at $967 a month. And that $967 is going to really be a cap on how much you can earn overall. So if you're getting Social Security disability insurance benefits on top of SSI benefits, and let's say you're getting $500 in SSDI, that means you'd only be able to get another $467 in SSI to sort of fill that gap and get you up to that $967 amount. Now, SSDI has a few eligibility requirements that the federal government's going to look at to determine whether you're eligible for this benefit. They're going to look at your income. So, unlike the state of Michigan, fortunately, the federal government is a little more clear on this aspect, and we do know roughly how much income you can make before you become ineligible for this benefit. It'll be listed on one of these next slides here, but in 2025, it's just over $2,000. They also look at your they have a countable resource limit. So like the state of Michigan has a resource limit for state disability assistance, the federal government has a resource limit for supplemental security income as well. Now it's a lot lower than the state of Michigan's limit. For SSI, they give you a limit of up to $2,000 in resources if you're a single person, and $3,000 if you're a married couple. Now, there are a lot of things that are excluded from that calculation as well, and we'll get into those so that you know what's not counted toward that $2,000 amount. Now, just like SSDI, one of the requirements for SSI eligibility is that you meet the federal definition of disability, and this is going to be the same definition that they use for SSDI benefits. Now, if you don't meet that definition, you could still be eligible for SSI if you're over the age of 65 as well. Now, the resource limit. So I touched on that during the last slide here, but just to reiterate, it's $2,000 for an individual or $3,000 for a married couple. And there are a good few things that aren't counted toward that calculation. So like with the state of Michigan, they're not going to include one motor vehicle per household. So it's one thing to note with that is it has to be a vehicle that you use to get around and to go to work or go out and get groceries or something like that. If it's something that's just a junked car, then that's something that might be counted toward your resource limit, or if it's a recreational vehicle, it's something that they could count toward that as well. They also exclude your primary residence, so if you own your house, that's not going to count toward that $2,000 either, and any life insurance policy that has a current cash value of $1,500 or less will be excluded from that resource limit also. Now, with SSI, there is also an income limit. So you can still have income, so you can still be working a bit and receive SSI benefits. But any income that you do make is going to reduce the amount of that benefit that you can get through SSI. So income from your spouse, if you are married, will also work to reduce that benefit. And that's because with married couples, the government assumes that although you don't share all your expenses, there are a lot of expenses that you share. And most income from children, if you have children, is not going to work against your SSI benefit. But if the income that your children have is from SSI toward their own benefit, then that might be something that could count against yours as well. So, as I had noted, in 2025, if you make less than $2,019, then you could be at least financially eligible for SSI benefits through the federal government. And the way that works, it's a little tricky how the federal government gets to that calculation because there are a lot of bits that are excluded and some parts are excluded on a partial basis. So to start, Social Security is always going to exclude the first $85 you make. So what the federal government does is they say that first $85 you make, that's yours. That doesn't count against your benefit at all, and you can keep that. Now, anything you make above that $85 amount is going to reduce your SSI benefit, or at least the benefit that you might be eligible for, at a rate of 50 cents on the dollar. So if you're still working and you're making $500 a month, then the eligible SSI benefit that you have is going to be reduced by 500 minus that 85, and then half of that. Now, any unearned income that you make is going to reduce your SSI benefit dollar for dollar. So unearned income is going to be anything like another government benefit, so something like SSDI benefits. If you're eligible for that simultaneously, that's going to reduce the SSI benefit that you can be eligible for $1 for $1. And like I had said before, because the maximum SSI benefit you can get is $967, they just want to make sure that if you're receiving other government benefits, then all of those benefits added together don't add up to more than that $967 amount. And with unearned income, there's also an exclusion with that. So for the first $20 that you make in unearned income is going to not count against your SSI benefit. So again, if you have an SSDI benefit of $500, then they're going to subtract $20 from that and only use that $480 when they're factoring at what your SSI benefit could be. Oh, I've got a quick example of a calculation here, because I know that's there's a lot to go over when I was putting this together, so I think maybe mapping it out could make it a bit easier to follow. So if we take somebody who has $300 in wages, so they're just working maybe like a day or two a week, a couple hours, that amount that they earn in wages is going to be their earned income. So that's money that they earn through work, and it's considered as such by Social Security. Now, this person also, because they're not working much, they're still maybe disabled and need some help financially, they're receiving SSDI benefits of $200 a month. Now, this SSDI benefit is going to be considered unearned income, so it'll be considered differently when Social Security is making that calculation. So we've got the maximum federal benefit rate of $967. That's the first number we've got there. And we had this individual who was making $300 a month. Now remember, we've got a total of $85 in exclusions. Now there's the $20 that we're going to take away from the SSI benefit, and then the $65 that is going to be taken away from the earned income, the $300 that he earns every month. So if we take the $300 and we take out $65, and then divide that number by 2, because remember, for earned income, anything you make above that $85 taken out is going to be taken out, or it's going to work against your SSI benefit at a rate of 50 cents on the dollar. That leaves us with $117 in earned income that'll be taken into account when Social Security is making that calculation for your SSI benefits. Now, the unearned income side of this last bubble here is a little simpler. We have that $20 exclusion, so with any unearned income, Social Security says you can keep the first $20, and we're not going to consider that when doing this calculation. So if we subtract that from the $200 SSDI benefit that he's getting, it'll leave us with $180. So all we've got to do at that point is take the total of $967 minus the earned income Social Security considers minus the unearned income they consider, which will leave the potential SSI benefit at $669.50. Another thing that is important to consider when applying for SSI benefits is your living arrangement. So your living situation is just who you live with, who's in your house with you. And this is important because generally the federal government assumes that people who are living with you are going to be helping out around the house and helping with the bills and the expenses that you're responsible for. It sounds like sometimes that doesn't always happen. But in general, they assume that if you have a spouse or maybe kids, that some people are helping pay the gas and electric bills and the rent and things like that. Now, if you're in a hospital or nursing home and Medicaid pays for over half of the cost of that care, that's something that Social Security is going to consider as well. And all these things are important because it can work to reduce your benefit. So what the federal government calls this, so say somebody is helping you pay for rent. Social Security is going to look at how much you're paying in rent and how much that other person is paying to determine whether or not you're paying what they're going to look at as an equal amount or a fair share. And based on that, they're going to determine whether you're receiving what they call in-kind support and maintenance from somebody else. So if somebody's helping you out while you're unable to work and they're paying for all your grocery bills or anything of that sort, Social Security is going to look at that like it's income in a sense, and they're going to reduce your potential SSI benefit as a result. Now, it can also only reduce your SSI benefit up to a third of the total amount you're eligible for, which with the current federal benefit rate is around $342. So even if someone's paying $5,000 to help you out every month, that's not going to make you ineligible for SSI entirely. Now, there are some considerations that you have to look at to determine whether or not you might not be eligible for SSI, some things that might rule you out for the program. So if you're currently in prison, jail, or have an outstanding warrant, that's something that could disqualify you from this program as well. If you're residing in a facility for at least a month, so something like a homeless shelter or a public operated community residence, something of that sort, that may make you ineligible for SSI benefits at least during that time because the federal government assumes that your needs are taken care of in a facility like that. And additionally, because this is a program provided by the federal government, most non-citizens, at least without a certain United States status, would be ineligible as well. Now, our resident expert on medical eligibility is going to be Min Huang here, so I'm going to have him come up to talk to you a little bit about that side of things.
Good evening, everyone. As Nick mentioned, my name is Min Huang, and I'll be talking to you guys about the medical eligibility for disability benefits through the Social Security Administration. Now, before I get to that, we forgot to mention this earlier. I'm sure all of you might have questions as we're going through this presentation, as this does get very complicated. So please do write down those questions, and towards the end of our presentation, we do have some time set aside to answer as many questions as we can, and certainly we might not get to all of them, but we certainly will try our best, all right? Okay, so with that, let's talk about disability and what this term really means under Social Security law, all right? A common comment that I get a lot from clients is, well, my doctors told me that I'm disabled. That very well may be true, but the thing to always understand when you're dealing with federal benefit programs and when you're dealing with the law is that words that we use in everyday conversation may not necessarily mean the same thing, okay? So we're gonna talk a little bit about what does disability mean under Social Security law, okay? I wanna be very specific here because disability comes in a lot of different forms under different areas of law, and it can mean different things in those different laws. So we're gonna focus primarily on just Social Security, okay? As Nate mentioned, so long as you are in the world of Social Security, disability means the same thing, okay? So that's important to note. Now, as to how the word is defined, as you can see on the slide, disability means that you have either a physical or mental impairment that prevents you from being able to work, all right? Unlike the state definition, which requires you to be out of work for 90 days, for the federal government and with Social Security, it's much longer, okay? You need to have a condition that will keep you from working for either 12 months already, or it is expected that you'll be out of work for 12 months. So it's gonna be for a much more longer period of time. Okay, so how does Social Security actually evaluate someone to see if they meet this complicated definition, okay? And what they do is they have a 5-step process that we're gonna talk through now, okay? And then at various points during this process, there may be times where you might be approved and be found disabled, okay? The very first step that Social Security does is it asks, is a person engaging in substantial gainful activity, okay? Substantial gainful activity is just a fancy legal term for, hey, is this person working? And if so, are they making enough that we feel that they can support themselves, right? So what substantial gainful activity usually just translates to is a dollar amount, okay? So if you're working, they're gonna look at how much you're making before any taxes and deductions. And the amount for the year 2025 is $1,620, okay? So if you're working and you're making at least that much in gross earnings in a month, then you are not disabled under Social Security rules, okay? For a lot of the cancer patients, the individuals' cancers that we work with, typically they're out of work, so that's usually not an issue. But this is one of those instances where if you're working a little bit, you may be okay, and the process continues. The second step of this analysis, is that if you're not working, or if you're just working a little bit, they're gonna look at your medical conditions to see whether or not it's actually severe, okay? And again, this is where the 12-month requirement comes in, right? And this is important, particularly for individuals with cancer, because a lot of times what we hear from our clients is, well, I've been diagnosed with cancer, which is a very severe illness, right? But as we've learned from talking and working with clients over the years is that everybody's cancer journey is a little bit different, right? Sometimes people have a severe medical reaction that lands them in the hospital that leads to the cancer diagnosis. Sometimes they have no symptoms at all, right? And it just gets brought up during a routine visit, whether it's a mammogram or some other diagnostic things, kind of a screening that they may do, okay? So the important thing to understand with the step 2 analysis is that they're really looking at how is this person being affected by the diagnosis, okay? Most of the time, having the diagnosis itself isn't gonna necessarily mean that you're disabled, okay? What might happen is if you don't have any symptoms from your cancer, but your treatment, we all know that chemo is not easy, right? Your chemo and your other treatment may be what's leading you to not be able to work, okay? All right, so assuming that you have a severe condition that has lasted 12 months or is expected to last for that period of time, the analysis continues. But if you, let's say, been diagnosed with a lower stage cancer, can finish your treatment in 6 months, and then you're done and you're back to work, you won't be found disabled or eligible for benefit programs. Okay? So, assuming that you move on to the next step, you have a condition, it's severe, it's going to be expected to last for 12 months or has already done so, the next step that Social Security does is compare your medical treatment notes against this list of conditions that they maintain, okay? If you have a condition and it's severe enough that meets the requirements on that list, Social Security will automatically find you disabled and will approve your case for benefits, okay? Again, most cancer diagnoses in and of itself does not necessarily mean that someone would meet something on that list. The one exception I can think of off the top of my head is leukemia is one common example. But most of the time, it usually needs to be a stage 4 cancer or something more severe. Okay? So if you have something on the list, you meet the requirement, your benefit gets approved. But if your condition is pretty bad and it's causing you to have to leave work, but is not so severe as what's listed on this list that Social Security maintains, it doesn't mean that your case doesn't get approved. It just means that they move on to the next step of the analysis, okay? The next step they do is they want to figure out what can you still do despite your condition and the treatment that you're going through, okay? And what they're going to do is they're going to compare what you can still do against what's required of the jobs you've done in the past, okay? If you can still do the jobs you've had in the past, in this case, within the last 5 years, then Social Security expect you to go back to that job as opposed to relying on these benefits, okay? So if you can do those jobs in the past, the application typically will get denied at this point, okay? Versus if you cannot go back to those jobs, then they will continue their analysis. The final step of figuring out whether or not someone's disabled, so at this point, you're someone with a condition that's severe, it's lasted for quite a while, or is expected to last for quite a while. You know, it's not quite so bad to be on Social Security's list. You can't do your past work. Now they're going to look at, are there any other types of work out there that you can still potentially do, okay? Now, the thing that I often remind clients here is that the law does not require the government to show that there is a position out there open at this moment that's available for you. The requirement under the law is they need to show that there is a type of job that you can still do despite your condition, okay? Because that's the thing that oftentimes I hear clients are upset about, right? Is that if they can give me this job, right, or find me this job, I'm happy to do it. But that's not the requirement that they are bound by under the law, okay? So if there is a finding that there are absolutely no jobs that you can do given your current condition, then your benefit gets approved, right? Whereas if they can find a job that exists in significant numbers in the national economy that they think that you can do, then usually at that point, your application will get denied, okay? And I want to emphasize that they're looking at the national economy. They're not looking at what's available to you locally in your region or even in your state, okay? Because there's no requirement or you don't really have a specific right to live in the state that you're in, okay? All right, so now that we kind of talked about, oops, there we go. All right, so now that we've talked about what disability means and how that translates, let's talk a little bit about how does someone actually apply, okay? Like any benefit program, you start with an application, okay? And how you apply differs slightly depending on which program you're applying for, okay? With the disability insurance, Social Security Disability Insurance Program that you pay into, your options include applying for online, if you have a My Social Security account. You can do a phone call with the local office, or you can go walk in with an appointment, because right now, I don't think they allow walk-ins anymore. You have to actually make an appointment, okay? If you're applying for SSI benefits, which is the Financial Needs Program, the only option that I'm aware of at the moment is either by phone or in person, okay? The reason for that is that the SSI program, as Nick mentioned, has a lot more requirements. So the application for that tends to be a lot more complicated. So it's not very user-friendly. Okay? When you apply, the two things I noted here to be mindful of is the severity of your condition. Okay? Certain severity of your condition means that you may meet the requirement for what they call terminal illness or TERI cases. Now, that does not mean that your prognosis for your cancer or your condition is that it is in fact terminal. It just meets a definition for what they define as to be considered terminal. The other one is compassionate allowance. There is another list that Social Security maintains, and if you have a condition that's on that list, it meets this compassionate allowance. And what this does is that it will fast track your application, okay? As of right now, typically the wait time for initial decision on an application is about 6 months or more, depending on where you are in the country. So if you have a condition that meets these requirements, you want to emphasize that on your application so that they will fast track your application as much as possible. Okay, so now that we talked about applying, let's talk about what benefits you're actually going to get if you do get approved, all right? As Nate mentioned before, if you are on the SSDI benefit program and you get approved, there is a cash benefit that you get every month, and when in the month you actually get it will vary depending on your birth date, okay? The thing to know about the disability insurance benefit program is that it does have a 12-month look-back period, okay? What that means is that if I became disabled 2 years ago, and it took me a while to actually work on this because I either didn't know about it or I was too sick to work on it, Social Security will give me benefits up to a year from the time that I apply, assuming I was actually disabled a long time ago, okay? There is also a 5-month waiting period, okay? Which means that from the month that Social Security determines I'm disabled, there are going to be 5 months in which Social Security will not be giving me any benefits because of that waiting period, okay? With the Social Security Disability Insurance Benefit Program, you do get Medicare, but you have to be eligible for the benefit for 2 years or 24 months before the Medicare benefit kicks in, right? And the other nice thing about this benefit program is that it does offer you what's called auxiliary benefits, so additional cash benefits if you have dependents who are relying on you, particularly if they are kids. Oops. With the SSI benefit program, the benefit there is paid the first of every month, and as Nate mentioned, the maximum amount for this year is $967. If you and your spouse are both eligible for SSI benefit, the combined benefit amount per month is $1,450 this year per month, okay? With SSI benefits, you do get Medicaid through the state of Michigan. That is true for Michigan and may not be true for every state, since that's state specific. With this benefit program, unfortunately, there are no auxiliary benefits for dependents. Okay? All right, so once you're approved, things doesn't quite end there. One thing I do want to quickly note is that there are concurrent benefits, as Nick somewhat kind of alluded to earlier. There are times when someone's disability insurance is quite low, in which case they will receive some amount of SSI to kind of supplement that income and that benefit, all right? You will get past due benefits oftentimes just because of the wait time that it takes for them to process applications. And all that really means is just a benefit that they should have been paying you while you've been waiting and going through this process, okay? Once you've been found disabled by Social Security, it doesn't necessarily end right there. There will be reviews that they do every few years just to make sure that you haven't gotten better and that you still meet the definition for disability as defined by them, okay? And in addition to that, there are gonna be some reporting requirements that you have to abide by, particularly for anyone who receives SSI benefits, because income may change, household arrangements may change, a lot of different things that might affect eligibility. So the government puts the onus on you, the recipient of those benefits, to notify them when there are changes. Okay? So with that, I'm going to talk one last thing, and I'm going to hand it over to Kathy, which is how do you actually find help, right? As you might have gathered, this gets very complicated very easily, which is why if you're able to find help, it is highly encouraged, right? So a couple of resources here for legal aid. Our program, we offer free legal services to Karmanos cancer patients who are eligible for our services, and the other major legal aid program in the area is Lakeshore Legal Aid. Separate from that, please know that you do have the option to seek private legal counsel. Attorneys, private attorneys who work in this area will not charge you up front, okay? What they would do is they will receive a portion of your unpaid or BAP benefits if your claim gets approved. This is regulated by Social Security, okay? And it's the same regardless of which law firm you're working with. The amount that's allowed right now is 25% of past due benefits or up to $9,200, okay? So if 25% of my past due benefits that Social Security owes me is $10,000, the attorney does not get the $10,000. They cap it at $9,200, okay? Most cases do not usually rise to that level. That is simply the cap that is at this moment, okay? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy, who's going to talk to you about employee benefits.
Did you leave me the clicker? Thanks, Min. Thanks, Nick. I'm just going to wrap this up with talking about employee disability benefits. The two gentlemen that I have the pleasure of working with did a really great job of talking about state and federal benefits. And that's where a lot of people will be receiving sort of income replacement if they find themselves disabled and unable to work. But you can also receive them through your employer. Now, what's important to know is not every employer has to offer you benefits. It depends a lot on the size of the employer. It depends on what kind of benefit package they want to entice people with. So I think it's just important to remember that. So if somebody says, oh, I have short-term disability benefits through my work, your friend may not have short-term disability benefits through their work. So it's just really important to know what your employee benefits are. And the reason is because they can be really, really helpful. And a lot of times people never know their employee benefits until they need to access them. So a lot of times I will tell people it's really good every now and then just to pull out your employee handbook or ask your HR department for a recent employee handbook, benefit handbook, to go through and see what are the benefits that I am eligible for. There's just a load of them. It can be short-term disability. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Long-term disability. Sometimes people pay into something called a catastrophic insurance, which means it's a one-time payout from your employer. It can be anywhere from $1,000 till $10,000 because you've been diagnosed with a particular illness. And so you have to pay into these benefits, and sometimes your employer does it. Sometimes your employer pays the premium for them. Sometimes you share that. So a lot of times, if you think about, for example, health insurance, many times your employer will pay, let's say, $200 a month for your health insurance, and you'll pay $100 a month, and that's called your premium. So a really, really good place to look for this kind of thing is on your pay stub, because a lot of people will say, well, Kathy, where's one place I can start to look to see what even benefits I have? And a pay stub is a really good place to look. And I'll show you an example of pay stub to give you an idea about that. But what's really important is to talk to your HR department. Now, people will say, human resources, are they really there for me, Kathy, or are they really there for the company? And the truth is it's both. I mean, they're there, obviously, to make sure that the company runs, it has employees, that's why it's called human resources, but they're also there to make sure those employees are taken care of, and they're the ones that will really know what the benefits are. Don't necessarily count on that your supervisor would know the benefits. They may know some of them, but the HR rep is really going to know, the human resources rep is really going to know. And It's great to ask questions. A lot of times people say, well, Kathy, if I ask them for my employee handbook or my employee benefit book, won't I be tipping them off that I might be sick? I said, all you have to say is, hey, I can't find my employee handbook. You know, I've been working here for 20 years. It's probably somewhere in the basement. Can I have a new one? Most companies will also have a lot of their benefits just listed on a portal that employees can access. So that's another way to find out what your benefits are. Now, one of the things that people will say is, do I have to tell my employer I have cancer? And the answer is no, you do not. But if you want to access some of these benefits, like short-term disability or FMLA, which I'm about to talk about a little bit, you have to submit paperwork that talks about why you need to take a break from work or why you need an accommodation. It does not have to list cancer specific, but it has to list what you're unable to do or what you need to be accommodated, and it usually needs to be signed by a physician. So I tell individuals with cancer, if you don't want your employer to know you have cancer, ask your primary care physician to sign that form, because if you have your oncologist sign that form and it writes, you know, medical oncologist or radiation oncologist, an oncologist is a cancer doctor, and so that could be tipping off your employer that you have cancer. So it's okay to get those forms signed by your primary care doctor. The reason I like to talk about health insurance is because typically, when you have a diagnosis of cancer and you're thinking about not being able to work, one of the things you're doing is most likely going to the doctor and getting treatment. And so you want to be sure that you understand your health insurance. If you get it through your employer, which many people do, it's just important to know what your health insurance is. And there's a couple different types of health insurance. There's basically your fee-for-service, where you go somewhere, they give you a treatment, they do an office visit, and then you pay a particular copay. That's sort of what we call like your traditional health insurance. Then there's managed care, and most employers will offer some kind of managed care. And you may have heard about like PPOs or HMOs, and that's just when your primary care physician, they're kind of like a gatekeeper, and they're the ones that you have to, for an HMO, go to first and say, hey, I'm not feeling really well. I have this pain in my chest. I think, you know, I might need to see a specialist, and then they'll go ahead and give you a referral, and you can see a specialist. A PPO, or primary provider, a PPO is preferred provider. That means that anybody who's in your network, you can just go to directly, and you don't have to go through your primary care physician. It's still managed because you can only go to the people in network, but it still allows you to go directly and not go through your primary care physician. The reason that this is really important to understand and know what kind of health insurance you have is because there's something called open enrollment at the end of every year. So come October, November, every employer will say, hey, we have open enrollment, which will allow you to either maintain the health insurance you have with your employer or maybe pick a different plan. If you're currently receiving treatment for your cancer and you think you want to go to maybe from the traditional to a PPO or from the PPO to an HMO, because HMO, the premiums are cheaper every month or less expensive every month, you just want to make sure that the network includes your treating hospital, your treating oncologist, and that the plan covers the medications that you typically take. So it's really important to know what your health insurance covers. So if you want to switch plans, and people do, that you just make sure that when you switch, you're not going to lose a provider or you're not going to lose some coverage. Okay. Now, the FMLA, or Family and Medical Leave Act, is something that I think a lot of the individuals we work with will take advantage of. It's a federal law, and what it basically is saying is that in the event that you need to take some time off of work, you can still come back to your job and it will be there for you. So you won't necessarily lose your job. Now, what's important to remember is there's no money with the FMLA Acts, or Family Medical Leave. It doesn't come with paid leave. So what it is that your employer can allow you to go away, get your treatment, and come back and still let you have your job, or at least an equivalent job. Now, one thing to remember is people will say to me, well, if I need the income and I have vacation or I have paid time off, how does that work? Can I take the two at the same time? And the answer is yes. In fact, most employers will require that you do that. So let's say, for example, I have 3 weeks of vacation and I want to take 6 weeks off for my chemotherapy. I put in for FMLA, it gets approved, I'm taking 6 weeks off. My employer will require that I also put in for 3 weeks of vacation, and I will get income for those first 3 weeks from my vacation pay, and my job will still be protected when my vacation pay runs out. Now, somebody might say, but Kathy, I have a spouse, I have family members that can support me. I'd rather take my FMLA and then when that all runs out, then take my vacation, and when that all runs out, take my paid time off. And the truth of the matter is that if you could do that, most employers would go broke. Why? Because they can't allow people to be gone that long. That's why under the law, they are allowed to have you take it simultaneously, your paid time off with the actual benefit itself. Now, most people qualify for FMLA. Most employers have to provide it. It's just very, very small employers that maybe would go out of business if a lot of people had to take time off work. But most employers qualify for it. And the other thing is that it also is like all public employers as well. So if you work for like a school system or the government, because it's a federal law, you're qualified there as well. Now, a lot of times people will say, well, what does it mean that I get time off? You can get up to 12 weeks off and still be able to come back to your job. So does that 12 weeks have to be taken all at one time? Absolutely not. So if I want every Friday off because of the way my treatment is, I'm wiped out after working for 4 days, I can take every Friday off, and I can take up to 60 Fridays off because 12 times 5 is 60, and my normal work week is five days, and I can have up to 12 weeks off, okay? Now, can you take it intermittently, like I might need 3 weeks here and 2 days there? And the answer is yes. You just have to let your employer know as soon as you possibly know that you need the time off. And this is the paperwork where you have to submit to show that you have a reason to need to be taking that time off. And again, you do not have to put cancer down, but you have to give enough medical information and have it signed by a physician so it's approved. You can also take time off because you're caring for somebody. So let's say you're not the individual with cancer, but you're caring for somebody who is, and your employer has to comply with FMLA. You can submit to have time off, and you can get it even though you're not the individual who's sick themselves. Now, the reason I like to bring up life insurance is because many people don't know that they actually have life insurance through their employer. Some people don't, but some people do. The reason it's really important is that when you become disabled and maybe have to leave work temporarily, or let's say leave work permanently, you're not going to be able to go back to work. It's important to know that some of these benefits can go with you, and life insurance is one of those. It's really difficult to get life insurance once you've been diagnosed with cancer. Okay? But if you've had it with your employer, okay, something that they paid into or you paid into, and you're now going to have to permanently leave that job and not go back to work, some life insurance policies will allow you to take the life insurance policy with you and apply what's called for a lifetime waiver of premiums, meaning that you're so sick you can't go back to work, so that company's going to waive the premiums for the rest of your life, and that policy is paid in full. So that life insurance policy is intact so that when you die, your beneficiaries are able to access it. So that's just something to know, and a lot of people, I just like to tell them that because they don't always realize that from their life insurance. And then finally, I'd like to sort of wrap up here with short-term and long-term disability benefits, because very similar to the benefits that both Nick and Min talked about, these benefits provide income. So short-term and long-term disability, they actually provide income for individuals. Now again, a company does not have to provide these benefits, but a lot do because it makes them a sort of an employer people want to work for. So it's really important to know. Now, when you have these benefits, like I said, usually on your paycheck, it will show you that you're paying into short-term disability or into long-term disability. But if you're not sure about that, you can always ask your HR department. Okay? One of the things that I think is important to remember with these is, like I talked about with the paycheck, is you can see here, you can sort of see the pay stub. When you go out on short-term disability, you have to realize that who's paying my healthcare premium, because you can see in a regular paycheck, all these premiums got paid. Usually they get taken out of my paycheck, okay? Now I'm going on short-term disability leave. I'm not quite getting the same paycheck. I'm getting a paycheck that's relatively reduced. Let's say it's only 60% of my pay. Is my employer still gonna take out my healthcare premium? Because if they're not, then you have to make sure you know how to pay that healthcare premium. Sometimes they'll continue to take it out. Sometimes you have to write a check and pay it. But what you don't want to do is lose your health insurance because the premium's not continuing to be paid. Most employers, when you go out on short-term disability, will continue to pay your healthcare premiums. Some won't. When you go on to long-term disability, some companies will let you continue with their health insurance, but they require you to write the checks and mail them in every month. So people will say, well, how do I know that my company would give me disability benefits? How is it defined? It's all in the policy. So unlike the federal government's definition, it could be similar to that one. It could be very different. It's all policy driven. It's all considered about the contract that the company has and that you agreed to when you purchased the long-term disability or they purchased it on your behalf. So you really have to look at the policy. So when clients say to me, Kathy, am I going to be found disabled? I said, you got to show me your policy. And then we take a look at the definition. But it is relatively similar to Social Security's. It has to be something that's pretty severe. You're going to be out for quite a bit of time, and it's expected that it's limiting your ability to work. Okay. So when people say, well, how much do I get? Most of the time it's about 60% of your regular pay. And short-term disability can last for a couple years. It also can last for like 6 to 9 months. I know one of our clients, she was on it for 2 or 3 years. And one of the things in our very early policy talked about sort of private insurance. Sometimes people will buy supplemental benefit plans like through AFLAC. So this client, she had bought like three different plans, one through AFLAC, she had one through employer. So she was actually getting paid by like 3 different short-term disability policies when she couldn't work and she was out. Many times your short-term disability policy will run out and then you can apply for long-term disability from the company. And many times if you are found eligible, that benefit can last even up to the age of 64. And then at that point you would apply for Social Security retirement. So it can actually be long-term actually for the rest of your life. Now, we are going to take about a 7-minute break, so Brittany can grab all your questions, get them from all the lovely people online, and then the 3 of us are going to come back up here and try to answer as many as possible. entertain any questions that anybody may have, whether it's specific or general. I do know that we went over a lot of material, and it can be really confusing, and we try to make it as accessible as possible. But I think one of the things that you can take home from this is that it's just not simple. It's just not simply like, hey, I can't work, therefore Social Security has to give me income. It doesn't quite work that way. It requires, you may be eligible for Social Security disability, but they have to have enough evidence in their file to make that determination. So what do I mean by that? I mean that they need to see in your medical record that you're having difficulty walking because of neuropathy in your feet. They need to see in your medical record that maybe the disease has spread, et cetera. So a lot of times when people get denied, it's not that they weren't eligible, it's just that there wasn't enough evidence in their medical record. About, I think it's like 70% of applications get denied upon the first time. So then the second appeal, or the first appeal, is called a redetermination. And many individuals are found disabled and redetermination. And then if they still find you not disabled, you can go to a hearing in front of an administrative law judge. That's when an attorney goes with you. You get to testify. The judge gets to hear what's going on. And many times people, I think like half of the people that go in front of a judge are then awarded disability benefits. So as you stick with it and gather more evidence and have a better case per se, a lot of times you can get the benefits that you're due. So I think Brittany's standing there with, okay, all right.
I do have a few questions.
Okay,
The first one I have, do you qualify for SSDI or SDA if you receive Social Security?
do you want me to take that or you want to take that? Okay, so it says, so just read it to me one more time, I share your answer.
Do you qualify for SSDI or SDA if you receive Social Security?
So Social Security, I think perhaps that person is using it as retirement when they say Social Security, because SSDI is Social Security, but it's the disability insurance part of it. SSI is Social Security, but it's the welfare part of it. And then there's Social Security retirement, okay? So it all kind of comes, Social Security disability insurance, Social Security retirement, Social Security early retirement, all comes from that same FICA pot that you paid into. If you are somebody who's receiving retirement, and I would say probably somebody who's receiving early retirement would probably be the best argument. There could be, so many people, their full retirement age is 65. As people, younger individuals, because of the way the system isn't quite, has enough workers to pay into it, now the retirement age is 66 and 3 months, 67, et cetera. When you are at your full retirement age, you get what they call 100% of your benefit. But a lot of times individuals with cancer need to take early retirement, and that's at 62. And when at 62, you're only going to get 70% of your benefit. So many times, if you're disabled and you're thinking, I'm going to go ahead and apply for early retirement, and that's going to be my income, you can actually also apply for Social Security disability insurance. You can start receiving your early retirement, but if you're found disabled, your benefit then will most likely be closer to that full 100% benefit that you would have gotten at like 66 than your benefit at 62. So we encourage individuals who think that, they're like, listen, I'm not going back to work and I just want to apply for early retirement, I really need the income. We tell them, then that's what you should do, but let's also apply for disability because it could be that you're going to receive it. And then it just replaces. So you don't get both early retirement and disability, you only get Social Security disability, but it's usually at a higher amount.
Thank you. Another question that we have is, how do the states or Fed.gov validate eligibility based on assets? It seems that there would have to be someone coming out to the home to take inventory.
That's a great question. It's a really good question. So Well, there's a couple things. One is you have to sign over some permission for them to be able to, for example, search by your social security number to see if there's any bank accounts in your name, et cetera. One, you are sort of swearing under oath when you apply that this is all I have and this is all I own, but they do run like your social security number to see if any assets come back. Sometimes they are incorrect, so we've had clients say, hey, they say I have a second car. I don't have a second car. My son bought it from me. It should be in his name. And so sometimes we're able to fix that up. Sometimes you don't tell them something that you have, maybe you forgot, et cetera. And then when they do discover it, then what they will do is they can consider it an overpayment. You weren't eligible. And what they do is they may just stop your benefits for a period of time until they've recouped that overpayment, and then they can start them. But a lot of it's usually done, I think, with a search through your social security number and then also your word on it. That's why they like to do it in person, either on the phone or in person, so they can really talk to you to make sure you understand. That being said, they don't count your automobile that you use, like Nick and Min said. But like a lot of people in Michigan will have 2 and 3 cars, but a lot of the second and third car might be the one they bought for their kid, and it's a junker and it's in their yard. A lot of times you can work with your attorney to really get the true value of what those are, and a lot of times it's only a few $100s for the scrap metal, et cetera. So just because I have a couple other cars, but they're really not worth a whole lot, doesn't mean that you're not going to be found disabled, but you just have to do go through certain forms to be able to say what the true value is.
Got it. Another question we have is, what if you don't have a year on your job, so you haven't been with your employer for a year? Can you still get unemployment?
Unemployment. We didn't really talk about unemployment, so I'm not so sure about all the rules with unemployment. FMLA we did talk about, and so with FMLA, wanting to you have to have been with the employer for at least a year, and so now that can be, I think they can look back as long as, I have to think about this, they look back at least a few years. So let me give you an example. So if I worked for somebody and then I had to take some time off, let's say I worked for St. Joe's Hospital, and then I had to take some time off, and then I came back to St. Joe's Hospital, and then I take some time off, and then I came back to St. Joe's Hospital. As long as I worked for at least a year through all that time, I'm still eligible for FMLA, or that Family Medical Leave Act. It can be cumulative with the same employer over a period of time. But if you've been with somebody less than a year, as far as taking FMLA, it usually doesn't work because you have to record, I think it's about 1,200 hours, and it usually doesn't work.
Another question. During the presentation, you spoke about compassionate analysis. Can you give an example of this?
A compassion allowance? Sure. That's okay, compassion allowance. So as Min indicated, compassion allowance is sort of Social Security's way to say, we're going to be compassionate. We're going to allow for a quicker response on this application. So let's say Min and Nick both applied for Social Security on January 1st. And let's say Min had like a stage 1 cancer, kind of early cancer. Let's say Nick had more of an advanced cancer that was on what we call the compassionate allowance list that is on their website. You can go at it at any time and see all the diagnoses that are on there. If they both apply in January, they typically probably wouldn't have heard a decision until June. But Nick, having a more severe illness, might know as early as 60 days. So he may know by the end of February that he's been found eligible for benefits because they try to fast track that application.
Got it. The last question I have is, you mentioned opening an MI Bridges account. Who is eligible to have an account?
I think, good, that's great.
Kathy said, let me get a break.
I deal with MI Bridges a lot more often. So MI Bridges, pretty much anybody can open up a MI Bridges account. It used to be that some people are concerned that, hey, I don't have an email account because I don't usually use email, all that good stuff. But pretty much nowadays, anybody can open up an MI Bridges account, and it's highly encouraged that you do so. because that's an easy way to document any applications you file, anything that you submit or turn in to your worker at DHS, because fortunately sometimes paperwork go missing when you turn things in hard copy. When you submit things through the portal, it not only makes things easier on their end, you also have a good record that you've done so, okay? One thing that I will quickly mention about the MI Bridges account, since Nick brought it up earlier, is if you do decide to apply for state disability assistance on the MI Bridges account, you're not going to see an application for state disability assistance. They lump it under a benefit application for cash assistance. So that's what you actually see on the actual portal itself.
Got it.
All right.
Oh, thank you. Oh, there's another one. How can you apply for a caregiver for a person having treatment, if you know?
Right, for state disability assistance. So what the caregiver will probably need to do, and not 100% on this, is we don't encounter this as often. The caregiver will probably want to set up his or her own MI Bridges account and submit that application for cash assistance. There are going to be some questions that will ask whether or not you are the individual who is under a disability, or if you're a caregiver or someone. They will ask you those eligibility questions as part of the application. And then it gets funneled and gets evaluated and processed that way.
Got it.
Okay.
Thank
All right,
you.
thank you.
I think there's one more slide, the evaluation.
So quickly.
Yes.
that-
So thank you all so much for attending this evening. We really appreciate everybody in the room with us, as well as everybody on Zoom. There is a QR code on your screen that you can scan. My colleague Madison Pavlisak is also online. She's going to put the link for anybody who's still online with us, and it will also be emailed. Thank you all so much.